and of the Progressive Era that tries to solve the various problems of the Gilded Age through this little presentation here. Most of this presentation are pictures. And the title of the presentation is, It Was the Best of Times, It Was the Worst of Times. Does anyone know where I got that line from? It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Famous line from literature. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the time of plenty, it was the time of want. It was the time of virtue, it was the time of vice. Anybody? Yep.
Shakespeare?
No, not Shakespeare. Someone more recent than that. Jake. It's The Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens, okay? And do you remember, Jacob, what that story was about?
No, I don't.
Okay. It was about France just prior to the French Revolution, right? And then the French Revolution breaks out, and good people, bad people are all swept up in this crazy, huge-scale drama. Just like they're going to be swept up in this drama of the Gilded Age. The person who coined the phrase, the Gilded Age, was another author, and this person's the most famous, probably the most highly regarded American author of all time. Anybody know who he is?
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain. Very good, RJ. So Mark Twain described the age as a Gilded Age. Does anyone know what that means when something is gilded? Yeah, RJ.
It's golden?
It's golden. Is the whole thing gold?
No.
No. Okay, so what is golden then in a gilded object? Something like a candelabra, a candlestick, I don't know, a book stand, or any other kind of metal item. What does that mean?
It's covered in gold.
It's covered in gold. This thing called gold leaf, okay, this bit of gold that they pound and pound and pound, and then it's something like, I think, 1/10 the thickness of or actually 1/100th the thickness of a piece of paper, and they cover it on what kind of metal? Is it a precious metal? No, it's a trashy metal. Usually it's something like tin or copper or nickel or something much, much cheaper. So the Gilded Age is sort of like an allegory. On the outside, what do you've got? You've got lots of wealth, lots of affluence. America is doing very, very well. But, Jake, when you dig a little deeper, what are you going to see? Trouble. And you're going to see things that aren't as nice, and aren't as pretty, and aren't as sophisticated as the stuff you see there. All right. So this is the first image I wanted to show you. This is a picture of Mrs. Joshua Montgomery Sears. Yes, that Sears. The Sears family behind Sears, Roebuck and Company, the U.S.'s first big commercial seller. Up until just recently, until Walmart came around, it was the #1 retailer in the United States. The person who painted this picture, his name is John Singer Sargent. John Singer Sargent is from Boston, Massachusetts. And he recognized that there was this new need. A need to take pictures, paint pictures of America's very wealthy people. So he trains at the prestigious École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, which is considered the greatest art school in the world at the time. And he learns how to paint portraits. And he's very, very famous for painting white people's skin as sort of porcelain white. When you look at Mrs. Joshua Montgomery Sears, does any kind of perspective come to mind? What kind of woman do you think Mrs. Sears is? If you were to look at her face in particular, zooming in. All right. What do you think of when you see that face? What kind of woman do you think she was? Is she friendly?
No.
No. Is she intelligent?
Yeah.
I think it conveys intelligence. What else? Not friendly, so what kind of, if she's not friendly, then what might she? If the absence of something means something else is present. Ryan, what do you think might be there?
I don't know. She just seems kind of mean.
Imperious,
Yeah. Like,
arrogant,
I'm better than you.
stuck up,
Yeah.
okay? Somebody who is used to getting her way, okay? And that's exactly who she was. She was a woman who lived her life, in a sense, always getting her way and always enjoying the fabulous wealth that her husband provided for her. Let's take a look at another picture from this time period. This is a picture by a photographer. It's titled "Children Sleeping in the Street," and it's pretty much of the same year as the painting by John Singer Sargent. The three children in this picture came home one day, and their father said to them, "We don't have any money to take care of you. Beat it. Fend for yourselves. Go out and somehow figure out how you're going to survive." And when you're homeless in 1899, what kind of social services do you think you could call upon, Mark? What kind of services do you think for kids, for anybody is available? Yeah, there are some, but most of those services are provided by churches. And they have very, very limited means. Now, can you guess where this street might be? What street do you think you'd be most likely to see a scene like that in the U.S. at the time?
Ghetto.
In the ghetto, okay. The ghetto of which city, though, Ryan?
New York.
New York, okay? And that is exactly where it is, okay? It's in a neighborhood of New York City called the Lower East Side. Now, the Lower East Side, in its time, is the most densely populated place, perhaps in the entire world. And it's densely populated with some of the poorest people anywhere in the world, even though the United States at the time is one of the wealthiest nations on earth. One thing that we do each year, that I like to do each year, is I like to go on a field trip to New York City. And what we do is we go to a museum called the Lower East Side Tenement Museum. And we spend the morning going through this tenement that was constructed around the time of Abraham Lincoln's inauguration in 1860. And we see what a poor immigrant family during this time, during this point in the Gilded Age, what a poor immigrant family kind of lived like. And then what we do is we go back uptown and we go to another museum called the Henry Clay Frick Museum. And that is a beautiful marble mansion on Fifth Avenue in New York City. And it's filled with priceless works of art that the man who was behind the museum, his name's Henry Clay Frick, a steel magnate like the people you were simulating on Friday. This steel magnate had so much money that he retired at the age of 35. And after that retirement, he toured the world and bought up priceless works of art and shipped them back home to Manhattan, where he lived. And then he still had so much money after he was done with that, he donated his house and all of the art in it to a foundation that could show off his good taste forever. And his kids still had more than enough money. Now, the person who took this picture, and you need to know who his name is, okay? His name is Jacob Riis. Jacob Riis, and by the way, this is notes. This is part of what you'll be expected to know for our unit test. So if you don't take this stuff down, you might be at a very big disadvantage come the actual test. All right. Now, Jacob Riis himself is an immigrant. He's an immigrant from Denmark. And by luck, he arrived in New York with just a few bucks in his pocket. He had very, very little money. He was homeless, like the kids in this picture were homeless. And as luck would have it, he kind of stumbled into a photography job at a New York City newspaper. And this newspaper had some money and bought a state-of-the-art camera for $18.99. It was a camera with a flash. And in 1899, a camera with a flash was a very, very big thing to move around each and every shot. It was this big wooden contraption with big wooden legs. The camera itself weighed about 20 pounds. Then on top of that, there's a little wire connected to the camera and a little platform. And on this platform is some magnesium powder that you have to sprinkle on. And then you light it and poof, a big flash takes off and you can take pictures in the dark. It's the first time that people really had the ability of taking candid photography in dark places. So Riis would go into a place, set up his camera as quietly as he could, and snap a photo and then run away. And he had to run away because the people that he was taking pictures of didn't really appreciate getting their photo taken. Jacob Riis collected all of these photos into a collection in a book called How the Other Half Lives. How the Other Half Lives is a collection of all of these photos. And why do you think, Rosie, why do you think Jacob Riis would want to put all these photos in one place? Do you think he had a mission? Do you think he had himself a bias? Exactly. Now, who would buy this book? Would it be poor people, you think? No, it would be middle-class people. Okay? And that's what this era is all about. We're studying the progressive era. And the progressive era is all about trying to appeal to the middle class. And trying to get the middle class to do something about a lot of the social problems that were going on at the time. So this was a book that was aimed at the middle class. And Veronica, what do you think his objective was by putting all these things together? What do you think he would like to have seen done?
He wanted to see change.
Yeah, from whom?
Middle class.
From the middle class, true, because they need to put pressure on what, though?
Class.
On the upper class, to do more. And to change government, too. In this day and age, in the 1890s, there were very, very few orphanages. That's why these kids ended up in the street. So obviously one of the political points of view of this movement is to get the government to fund more orphanages. So Jacob Riis is part of a group of journalists. These journalists are not happy with the way things are. And they are known as muckrakers. Muckrakers. And that's a nickname. It's a nickname given to them by Theodore Roosevelt, the President of the United States. And it wasn't a very flattering term. It was his way of saying that all these people do is they dredge up the muck of society. All they do is let us know about how bad things are. But here's the thing. Things were really bad. There was a lot of poverty. And these journalists, the muckrakers, of which Jacob Riis is one of them, wanted to let people know and wanted to activate people to change it so that it could be better and that it could get better someday. Here's another picture by John Singer Sargent. It's titled The Mrs. Vickers in 1884. Your thoughts about how these young women look? Katrina, when you see women like this, what emotional response do you have? Do you think these women could be your friend?
Yeah.
Okay, why do you think so?
They're just, like, the expression on their face seems like they're caring.
Yeah, when you look at this picture, I think what John Singer Sargent was trying to do was trying to show you three sisters that really, really love each other and that are close and that they're intimate. What makes you think that? Where do you see maybe intimacy in this picture? Yeah, Ryan.
Her arm around the other sister.
Yeah, have you ever had a family photo, Ryan, with your family?
No.
Like a professional one?
No.
Like a professional one?
No.
You've only had snapshots?
Yeah.
You've never like gone to even Kmart and gotten a family photo? Like a legit family photo?
Nope.
How many people are in your family?
6.
6?
Yeah.
Not once. So the only thing hanging, I'm just trying to understand, Ryan. The only thing hanging
Just, like,
it,
solo pictures.
solo pictures,
Yeah,
people in isolation, like
Yeah.
school pictures and
Yeah.
stuff like that, or like team photos from some sports team or
Yeah.
something like that. But never like a professional photographer,
No.
that kind of thing. I got an idea. Go home today. Say, Mom, I really would like a professional photo of this family for Christmas.
Well, I can't now because all my brothers and sisters are gone.
No, they all get back for Christmas time.
Yeah, sure.
Not one. How old are you? The youngest?
Yeah.
So there's no picture of like taken at Kmart where like you're a baby on your mom's lap and there's anything like that. Wow,
I don't have a lot of pictures at my house.
that's sad. But yeah, if you were to take that professional photo, would you want to be shown with your arm around one of your brothers? You think?
No.
No. Like
My
this?
Family,
With
my
your-
family's not really that close.
Notice how she's reading the same book. Two girls are reading the same book.
Well, the first one's reading, the other one's just looking up at something in the background.
Yeah, that's true.
And the other one's just looking at
It definitely looks more leisurely. How about this? Who do you think? Where do you think she fits in the
She's
dynamic?
hated by
She's
the other-
hated?
by the other two sisters.
Where do you get the hate?
Because she's the one that's, if you look at it, they're close, they're practically touching. Well, they probably are touching, and then she's just off to the side.
Yeah. When I see this woman right here, I think of this as the older sister, and she thinks of herself as maybe being a bit more sophisticated than her sisters, lives a little bit more of a worldly kind of existence than her sisters. But yeah, I think the fact that they're not all in the same, doing the same activity kind of
I
shows
think-
some distance.
I think the one in the chair is actually the middle one, the oddball. Because the one that's like reading the book.
The oddball?
Yeah.
Are you saying this is the ugly sister? Like kind of like,
No,
No.
she would be the youngest, and the girl in the white's the oldest, helping her little sister read.
She's not 2. But
She's not 20 something.
that's true. Now think about this. Does anyone know how long it would take to pose for a picture like this?
Probably like a couple weeks.
Couple weeks? Yeah, about a couple weeks. I mentioned that he's one of the best trained American artists in the world. So a couple, by the way, his portraits are not small. This is at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And I think the portrait is like 11 feet wide by like 7 feet, or 11 feet long by like 7 feet wide. It's a huge, huge portrait. It's bigger than life. What do you think a couple of weeks' time of one of the best painters in the world is going to cost? Tremendous amount of money, that's what. So here's another picture by Jacob Riis. It's called Knee Pants, and the heading is at 45 cents a dozen, a Ludlow Street sweaters shop. In the Gilded Age, one thing that people had to contend with if you were a poor and immigrant person is something called a sweatshop. A sweatshop isn't so much a factory as often it is a private home. A home in which an entire family works in something called piecework. Piecework means that you get paid for the amount of stuff that you sell that gets accepted by the factory as quality made merchandise. What are some of the disadvantages you think of piecework? Emily, what's that? Disadvantages of doing piecework. If you don't do enough, you don't get a lot of money, okay? So if you're sick,
You're working.
yeah, you're working. What if you're young?
You're working.
You're working. RJ?
Don't these people would be like rushing through these things to get a lot done instead of working on quality?
Okay, yes, but they have a curb on that. For each one that you submit to be accepted, the overseer of the factory can look at the work you did and he can reject the knickers are short pants, that you made and say, nope, not good enough. And then you don't get paid for it. So if you rush too much, you don't get paid anything. So what you have here is a family in which here's dad, this is his brother, this is an uncle cutting pants, these are the girls, there's a little boy also sewing on the floor. You can't really see him very well. But what do you think the workday's like?
Long.
Elijah, what would you guess to be the average working day? 12 hours, so from like 7 to 7? Something like that. Typically in home, piecemeal, sweatshops, it would be about 12, sometimes as many as 14 hours a day, okay? One day off. For these folks, it would be Saturday. Anyone know why they'd take Saturday off? Anybody?
For church.
Not church. Yeah, Phil?
They're Jewish.
They're Jewish, okay? So their Sabbath is on Saturday and they'd work on Sunday. All right. Most people in the Lower East Side, a huge chunk of them, during this period of time, during the Gilded Age, they were of two predominant nationalities. The first is Jewish refugees from Europe, and the second is Italian American or Italian immigrants to the U.S., mainly from, anyone know what part of Italy most Italian Americans come from? Yeah, Sam? Sicily, very good. All right, this is a place that maybe some of you have been to. It's a picture of Cornelius Vanderbilt's The Marble House. Okay? Someone's been there? Mark, did you go there? No? Anybody been to Newport to look at the mansions? Phil, you been there?
Yeah.
Which ones did you go to?
I don't remember. I was like 8.
You were 8.
I think.
If you went to the Marble House, you would probably remember it because it is really, really over the top. The Marble House was made by Cornelius Vanderbilt, and the entire house, the exterior of the house, is made out of marble, the whole thing. Now, he called it a cottage. When you think of a cottage, you might think of a 1-room, 2-room kind of shack on the beach somewhere. His cottage is 110 rooms. It had a full-time staff of 60 people. He created one room that he called the Gold Room. I guess you can see how. And much like the period of time, the Gilded Age, everything in this room is gilded. Now, Vanderbilt spent a huge fortune on this house, even in its own day and time. He spent something like $8 million on a house, which today, adjusted for inflation, would be somewhere around $280 million on a home, on a private home. It's almost like that home Bill Gates has, which is the largest private residence anywhere in the world, 2/3 of which is buried underground. He's sort of waiting for the apocalypse, I guess. And Bill Gates' home is so big that he has a train system that can take him from one part of the house to another, like a little tram that takes him from once, because it's a lot of exercise to go from one end of his house to the other. But Vanderbilt spent so much money on this house, yet he spent 2 weeks a year at this house. That's it. The total amount of time that he would spend at it, 8 weeks. And it's a tremendous expense. Obviously, not very needed. This is another home. This is the home of Andrew Carnegie. It is meant to look like a Scottish castle. Yeah, right.
I have a question about the Marble House.
Yeah.
What would staff do when he wasn't there for the other?
They polished
weeks?
things.
They really just polished things?
Yep. They had a guy to make sure that kept people busy. It had to be in immaculate shape if and when Cornelius Vanderbilt would even decide to go up there for like a day. So yeah, it was, if you went there, if he just said, like if he just came up, took the train up to Newport that day, he would walk in and expect there to be a brilliant meal waiting for him. So they kept the kitchen constantly stocked, even though he never actually ate there for 50 weeks out of the year. And they would throw a lot of this food away in a day and age when many people were starving. It kind of shows the waste. Now Andrew Carnegie, with this house, Carnegie modeled it after a Scottish castle. Carnegie is a very, very rare story. He is a rags to riches story. And he came to the United States literally with 5 cents in his pocket. And in time became the wealthiest American ever, adjusted for inflation. He put his house on 5th Avenue in New York City. Anybody know anything about 5th Avenue? What 5th Avenue is like? 5th Avenue is the nicest street in Midtown Manhattan. It is one of the wealthiest streets in New York. And he built this in 1903. Now, let's look at another residence. Once again, can you guess who took this picture?
Reese.
Jacob Riis. Jacob Riis and his flash photography. Go to a place called a flop house. What is a flop house? A flop house is a very, very cheap place to stay. In Jacob Riis's time, you could stay at a flop house for 5 cents a night. Even these guys could afford 5 cents a night. What are some of the disadvantages of staying in a flop house, you think? It's not all luxury. Yeah, right?
It was probably wicked hot in there.
Yeah, do you see any windows in this place?
No.
No, so there is no ventilation. And no ventilation and tight quarters usually means what for your health, Sam?
Not good.
No. Can you guess a common disease that's spread through that kind of close quarters? Yep, influenza would be a big issue. Tuberculosis, another one. What kind of health care did the poor receive?
0.
No health care at all. What's another disadvantage you think of staying in a flop house, Vicky?
That it's crowded.
It's crowded, okay. Do you think you know all these guys?
No.
So imagine sleeping next to a sketchy guy, and that's all you'd find in a place like this is sketchy guys. Imagine spending your night next to a sketchy guy. Now they're poor, and they don't have anything. What if he noticed that maybe you had a quarter in your pocket?
He would shake.
He might roll you for that quarter, okay? So it's not a really great place to stay. And by the way, this picture almost got Jacob Reese killed.
Yeah, Mr. Moses told us that last year. He's like, he just went to there, opened the door, and just took the picture. It was like dark in there.
Exactly. All right. Here's a picture of one of Andrew Carnegie's steel mills. It's called Lucy. He named his steel mill Lucy after his daughter. I don't know if that's supposed to show how much you love someone by naming a steel mill after them, but Lucy was named after his daughter. If you can kind of see, it is an absolutely enormous, enormous facility. Living near a steel mill. What do you think that's like?
Loud.
Loud. Okay, remember you got to be able to walk to the steel mill. What else could you say maybe about it?
Smelled bad.
It smelled bad. There was lots of dust in the air.
I said
Lots.
something about Lucy.
What's that?
I said something about his daughter.
Well, you never saw Lucy. Lucy lived in New York. She wouldn't want to live in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh at this time was considered one of the worst cities in the U.S. because of all the steel plants. Even Carnegie didn't even live in Pittsburgh most of the time. He lived in New York mostly. For the workers living near these facilities, this is another one of Andrew Carnegie's buildings, but this is, fortunately for him, one of the positive things that he's known for, and that is his libraries. Toward the end of his life, Andrew Carnegie was the wealthiest man in the United States, but he was also one of the most despised men in the United States, one of the most hated men in the U.S. He had amassed a huge fortune, and one night he had a nightmare. He had a nightmare that he was damned to hell for all eternity. Woke up in a cold sweat. He took a look at his life and thought for a minute, what have I done to make the world a better place? I have made a ton of money. What have I done to make it better for everyday people? And so what he decided to do was to give away pretty much all of his money. He wrote about it in a book called The Gospel of Wealth. In The Gospel of Wealth, Andrew Carnegie begs wealthy people to do right by others, to give their money away. And so what he is going to spend most of his money on are libraries. Andrew Carnegie is going to build thousands of libraries in the United States, two of which you may have gone to. The first is the Richards Library in Paxton. That was funded in part by Andrew Carnegie. and the other is the Conant Public Library in Sterling. That was also funded by Andrew Carnegie. Why do you think Carnegie felt that one of the best ways of helping humanity would be to construct a library? RJ.
Libraries offer people information, so like some books could tell like poor people how to get rich.
Exactly. That you could find in your library the secret to improving yourself, to learning more about the world around you, to be able to help yourself out. He continued to build libraries. These are all just examples of Carnegie libraries. Here's how average people lived. A little bit different conditions than Andrew Carnegie. What you see here is a picture near a packing house in Chicago. Does anyone know what a packing house did? What a packing house did? It still exists today. A packing house slaughters cows or pigs or chickens and cleans them and gets them ready for market. There was one packing house that wanted to give its employees some recreation on Sunday, so they sponsored a football team. Anyone know the name of that team?
Packers.
The Green Bay Packers started off as a company team in the early 1900s of people who worked in slaughterhouses. If we go to this picture of Chicago here, when you kill cattle, what results? Where does all the blood, the guts, the intestines, the gunk that's left over go? They just throw it out in a sewer. But the sewer is an open-faced sewer. And they would toss it in this ditch, and then the animal waste would just come by down the trench in front of your home. That's what these planks do, is they walk you over the sewer. But in addition to that, your outhouses drain. That's where you went to the bathroom. Human waste, which is even worse probably than animal waste, also would go into this ditch as well. So imagine living on top of human waste and animal waste 24/7. Yeah?
So you just like walk outside your house, walk on that plank, and then just go to the bathroom in the sewer?
No, there was an outhouse, usually in the back of the house, okay? And it would be connected with a pipe, and that pipe would just dump the waste in this ditch right here,
Oh, okay.
which is pretty gross. Now take a look at take a look at this. This is a picture of an area, sort of like a courtyard where kids played. Okay, and you can see there's the garbage barrels right here, and the kids are all scurrying around there. Would you want to go to an outhouse in the middle of the night, say in January?
No.
Leave your house? So what was the alternative?
God.
Ben, what do you think the alternative was to an outhouse in January? A bucket underneath your bed. And in the morning, what would you do with the bucket?
Dump it in the sewer.
You dump it out the next convenient window.
Oh.
So this courtyard where these kids are playing, chances are a lot of the mud is feces. So it's gross. And as you might imagine, the disease is very bad. Here's a picture of people making sausage. Anybody make sausage at their house? Used to be, any of you Polish Americans? It's a big activity of Polish Americans, usually around Easter time, to put up the kielbasi for the springtime, okay? But making sausage is gross. What is sausage anyway? RJ?
It's bits of a ground up animal shoved into a tube, usually the animal's intestines.
That's correct. It's nasty. Okay? Now, here's a picture of how people lived in West Virginia. Picture of young miners in South Pittston, Pennsylvania. Those are young kids. Young kids were highly prized as mine workers. Can you guess why? They were small and they could crawl into places that adults couldn't. As you might guess, if you're digging coal at age 10, what are you not doing? Going to school. And if you're not going to school, chances are you're going to assure yourself of being able to dig coal for the rest of your life. So they begin, a lot of progressives say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't employ young people like we are here. Here's another picture of a sweatshop. These folks earned between $1 and $1.50 a day. The equivalent to that would be somewhere around $22 a day for their work. Some more residential palaces. These are bobbin girls who worked in a textile factory in Georgia. The average age of these girls is about 14 years of age. Do they look 14 to you? This woman, or this young girl here in the center, really sad. All right. All right, have a good day, everybody.
Just saying.
Yo.